Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming in here. This was a bill. It took a lot of time to get it across the finish line. And the reason is that for my administration, and I'm sure the legislators here know that affordability has been top of mind. Affordable housing is probably that area that, along with property taxes, utility rates, all the other things that go into your monthly budget, it probably is going to be the one that may be up there as most important. For too many Hoosiers, owning that first home has gotten out of reach. And let me make it very clear why that's happened. We had 3 years, 22, 23, and 24. We never had inflation like that generated, especially from government and its actions. Last time it occurred, it was a systemic economic issue related to the farm economy and inflation in general in the late 70s that only got tamped down after 5 years of raising interest rates, which had already gotten high. Imagine this day and age if your low rates were 10%. Well, that was my first home mortgage in the late 70s. And by the early 80s, late 81, Paul Volcker took rates up to nearly 20% to tamp down inflation. It took 5 years to get it out of the system. So this bill is about taking what now Hoosiers, Americans have been shouldering for 2 years, or at least a year and a half, would have been inflation that was generated in that last administration that totaled nearly 25% over those 3 years. So housing costs went up as much as anything, come down to some degree, but it's all cumulative. So here, we're trying to make it easier with what we can do as a state to at least make sure that our own state rules associated with homeownership are not going to be burdensome. A lot of that is going to be a function of your local jurisdictions. The folks that have been most successful entrepreneurs have worked with enterprising local governments to find out how you can make it easier to stub in utilities, to actually develop the lots, be a partner with, and not having rules and regulations that make it more expensive. Today, we're celebrating the signing of 1001, aimed at doing just that in Indiana. This law requires local governments to evaluate barriers to new housing and report on their progress. This law requires every city, town, county to hold a public hearing this year on ways to expand the housing supply. It includes reducing or eliminating certain parking mandates, for instance, for multifamily housing. It includes permitting smaller lots and higher density. May not work everywhere, but it allows it in places where it does make sense. It includes reconsidering aesthetic and design regulations that can add cost and delays. Again, if that's what you want to do in your area, you're going to be able to do it, but it's going to allow for places that want to do it with more value and cost consciousness in mind, the ability to be entrepreneurial there. The goal is to identify barriers to build more homes and lowering prices. Local units will also be required to submit annual housing progress reports to the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. That will allow the state to better understand how regional housing markets are responding to the need for more homes. I want to thank Representative Doug Miller, Senator Chris Garton for their leadership in this legislation. It's an important step for building more homes and making the American dream of home ownership more affordable to Hoosiers. So we're just starting here. We wanted to get maybe more done, but this whole concept of affordability, especially as it relates to the thing that you're going to probably spend the most money on once you set up a household, we'll get started. We'll see what we're getting done here and look to maybe do more down the road. I'll take any questions you might have.
Governor, on the issue of affordability, on the housing issue, one of the big criticisms has always been is that housing is not just supposed to move. People are staying in their places longer, not moving, because normally younger families get their first home, but people have to move. So does anything in 1001 address that? That's what my thought on affordability is. Earlier this week, you talked about spending the sales tax on gasoline. By my math, it's like $8 to $10 overall. Is that $8 to $10 going to make a difference in a Hoosiers as they go along?
It all adds up from what you spend on gasoline or fuel each month, adds up on food. Again, let's go back to what started all this. It was the policies from the federal government in 22, 3, and 4. Now whoever's in charge has got to do things to help offset it. The states that can get this done well. We're a state of common sense, relatively low costs. Our economy is growing twice the rate of our neighbors to the east or the west, 3 times as fast as Kentucky's, 6 times as fast as Michigan's. So we've got jobs that are paying more. In the short time we've been in charge, we've raised the average wage that we incentivize from 36 to 41 bucks. That's a big difference. And we've been spending 1/3 the amount. So all of that adds up. And when you look at how things were, you need to look at it pre-COVID, because you didn't hear a lot of this stuff. But when things go up 25% over 3 years, you now got to live with it. And inflation, sadly, is your new baseline. So yes, that may weigh into it. We're going to want to find out all the things. But I can tell you from entrepreneurs that have already tried to see what they can do, Cook Medical Group, for instance, in Spencer, Bloomington, West Baden, they found ways to build 3-bedroom home with a 1 or 2 door garage, back closer to the way it was before inflation from the prior administration. That's going to be the key. And then we're going to need to make sure insurance and all the things that go in as ancillary costs other than what you pay for it are in line too. You're right, it is important. We're not getting as many young people to move into homes that would like to, but this is just a start.
And then maybe you can talk about what, if this is the starting place, like what are the next steps? What are the things that you're hoping to accomplish in the next legislative session?
I'm going to be enterprising as governor, and we've already got enterprising legislators, so we're just getting started. Remember when I came in, it was property taxes. Another thing related to the cost of owning a home. And we delivered record relief there, $1.5 billion. Anybody that's getting their statements in the mail, I think Nikki Kelly, I don't know if anybody's here from Capitol Chronicle, but she's already stated how her own bill went down. So you should start seeing that here in your statements you're getting, payable in May and again in November. IURC reconstituted the board. That's not been done, I don't know if ever to the extent we did it. On that 5-member commission, 3 of the new 5 commissioners are ratepayer conscious. They're already doing public hearings in that arena. So we're looking at all of it. We're just getting started. My administration's only been over here a little over a year, and I've dealt with many of these legislators when I was in the state legislature. We're going to be enterprising to see how Indiana can do the most addressing the affordability issue.
Governor, some housing advocates are concerned that this might increase development but not actually lead to lower housing costs for the people that can't afford houses right now at the market rate, the people that really need housing.
I'm going to bring Doug Miller in to answer that, if you will. He's a builder, and he also is an author of the bill.
Thank you. It's good to be here this afternoon. In direct response to that, I want to talk to you, and I want to talk to Abdul's question as well. You know, one of the problems that we have right now is we have this stagnant middle market. And to Abdul's point, right, we've had individuals who want to move out of their houses and they want to move up, but we don't have enough supply coming in on the bottom side. And the actual intent of 1001 was actually about property rights and developmental rights. And I think some of our communities missed that going into this particular discussion. And we worked really hard throughout the last 8 weeks of session to have cognizant discussions about that. And the direct result of what 1001 has actually accomplished, to your point, is a scaffold. And it's a scaffold that we can build on moving forward. And there's some very specific components that are going to contribute to that. One, and I've heard this for the last 5 years as I've worked on housing legislation with housing advocates, is that we don't have sufficient data, right? We're always saying we're guessing, we're throwing darts at a wall, we don't know what we're going to hit. Well, if you've taken time to read 1001, we've got some very specific marks within the data points within that. We want to know how many homes were being built at 80% of AMI, how many at 125% of AMI, how many projects are being approved by our communities, how many projects are being denied by our communities, and why. So what we want to do is we want to aggregate that data, right, and then put together continued discussions about how that's going to happen looking forward, looking into 27 and 28. Right now, you could say to some degree that this is a crystal ball bill, right? I'm speaking very frankly, I was somewhat disappointed in our local governments that they have such a stranglehold on individual property rights owner when at the end of the day, to Governor Braun's bill, taxpayers are footing the bill for everything, right? It's great. We want to have low property tax bills. We want to have affordable lot prices. We want to have higher densities. And I think everyone needs to recognize that as we develop our communities, it's going to be impossible to start going out and buying raw farm ground, turning that dirt into lots. They're just too expensive. So we're going to be looking more at the periphery. And this bill does a lot of great things. It really looks at impact fees, because impact fees, quite frankly, when you start adding on $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 at a time, we know from data that we're taking 3,500 Hoosiers out of the market every time we spend another $1,000 on homes. So there is, to Governor Braun's point, there's an aggregate amount of discussion that needs to happen. There's an aggregate amount of current rules and regulations in place that we need to continue to work with local government officials on to say, hey, let's take a real good hard look at the processes and let's see what we can set aside, what we can change, what we can amend, what we can modify in order to bring more housing to the market. And let's be realistic. This is not rocket science. More housing supply means more competitive prices. More competitive prices means we're moving that stuck middle group up the ladder. We're bringing people in at the bottom. And the last thing I want to talk about is the underutilized assets of religious institutions being able to help those folks that need housing the most. And I'm excited that we might have the opportunity to take that particular discussion to summer study, and I'm thankful that, again, Governor Braun had the opportunity to sign this bill, that he supports this bill, and that his administration and our Speaker of the House, Todd Houston, is prospective in looking at how we have to address housing in the state when we're bringing more jobs and more industry than our neighbors.
Representative, during the session, there were some municipalities that expressed concern, to your point, this has to do with local control. It may be taking away too much of that, and in addition, it may be putting the cart before the horse by increasing housing supply without taking into consideration the necessary infrastructure, such as roads, water, sewer. What would your response to those criticisms be?
Frankly speaking, as a builder and developer, I've always worked on the premise that if I'm buying the property and I meet the rules and the regulations, I should be allowed to put the type of housing that it is there. You're right, infrastructure is a huge deal, right? But the state's already taken a great proactive step. We've enacted 1001 or 1005 in 2023, refunded a second time in 2025. We've got about 4,000 units in the marketplace, and those are 4,000 units that are based on the infrastructure that those particular funds are being used for. Those aren't grants, those are funds that are being paid back through tax revenue, and that fund's going to grow and continue to grow, and it's going to bring more housing to the market over time. I think the real discussion with respect to 1001 is the new guardrails we put up around impact fees, right? We say they got to be continuous. They have to contribute to the actual development themselves, and they have to be coterminous. So in other words, we're just encouraging our locals to say, if you want housing for growth to pay with growth, let's make sure that that's exactly what it's doing. Let's not pay for something that's happening across town. I'm not here to offend anybody or challenge anybody's authority. I'm not here to take local control away. What the intent of this whole bill was to have thoughtful discussions just to make sure that local governments are absolutely committed in their mind they're doing the right thing. And it was very interesting to hear their responses when they really got a little bit sideways at times by saying you're taking away local control. No, the intent's not to take a local control away. The intent is, let's have a thoughtful, fruitful discussion to make sure that the zoning guidelines that you have in place, that the density guidelines you have in place, the architectural standards you have in place, let's make sure they make sense and work. I mean, one of my biggest concerns is that the first responders across our state, and especially in central Indiana and our larger cities, can't afford to live and work and breathe and raise families in the homes that they, in the communities that they serve, because the cost of entry-level housing is too high. And that's one of our intents, is to get that affordable for everyone.
Do one more question.
Governor Braun, your response to the new developments overseas, the Iran president announced the blockade of Iranian ports, your thoughts?
I think it's a brilliant move. The fact that the Iranians, with their own military decimated, think they still have the controlling dynamic there, and I think the administration's been giving them a lot of leeway in terms of taking time. And I think they're dug into kind of what they've been doing for decades. So I think we'll see how that sorts itself out. I think that was a good move, and we'll see what happens. All I can tell you here is the reason I declared the gas tax holiday, and we're looking at all these issues like now housing. And by the way, when I did talk about the Cook Medical Group, they did this just by working with those 3 local governments. It didn't take any guideline other than communication. I think they'll catch on there. And utility rates, we've already talked about it. Any of the national issues that we got to navigate through, all I can tell you is prior administrations, when they projected weakness, and were predictably so, I think that's what has got us entangled in Ukraine and why we lost Crimea back then. Here, we'll stay tough. We'll do what we can as a state, and just watch it closely. Thank you all for coming in today. Appreciate it.